Bruce, you must have something really good too.
Of course I do. It's Bruce Danielson, and I guess I'm here to entertain you too.
Well, we want to get to our legislators here, and I think that's what's going to start. We have two of our legislators from District 15, we've got Stanford, and Reynold Nessiba, talk about the session.
Thank you, Tom. It's an honor to be back here at Democratic Forum. I am Jamie Smith, representing District 15 in the House of Representatives. It's the second year of my first term. I was coerced into doing this by Karen Soley. I bring you greetings from Karen Soley from District 15. If you don't know Karen, she is an incredible woman who is battling breast cancer right now, and she has not been able to make it to the session yet. But she's getting stronger every day, and I'm supposed to pass along some news that her PET scan last week came back clear. So, the prayers are working, and I appreciate that. There's also another gentleman in the House of Representatives that could use your prayers, folks. His name is Sean McPherson. He's a Republican from Rapid City. His PET scan wasn't as good. He was the first person I met last year when I was a newbie, and we have similar interests, similar ages. He's a pastor from Rapid. He had cancer in his leg amputated. Cancer came back metastasized to his lungs, and they've chosen not to treat anymore. So he has not been there either this session, but that is not as good a situation. But Sean McPherson and his family, doesn't matter, Republican, Democrat, anything like that. Public service, hold them in prayer. We'll stay on that note for a minute. I just think we should, as a group, acknowledge the students' lives and teachers' lives that were lost in Florida. And it's a senseless act, again, of hate, and we need to try that out. The disappointing thing for me is we had an election, or we had a vote this week in the House where they wanted to affirm that we could have the right to carry in our churches and our private schools. And it was just a vote basically to get us on the record so I can get my F rating from the NRA. There were a majority of the House voted for that. I did not, but we do need to do something. It is up to all of us to stand up and to try to solve this problem because our kids should feel safe in their schools. And so, not to lead down a note, but that's where my brain is today. It's been an honor and a privilege to serve the state in Pierre. I didn't know a whole lot about it before I went. And last year, I kind of kept my mouth shut and I kept my ears open and I tried to soak in how is this game played? And who are the people playing this game and how does it go? This year, I've come a long way. So just last week, when I was here at 1 o'clock at the very end, I got a call from Jason Frericks, senator, who's been a Democrat up from the District 1 up north. He has been a senator for quite a while. He was supposed to debate Mickelson on Ion Keloland on Sunday night, taping at 2 o'clock. I got the call at 1, and his transmission broke. So at 2 o'clock after I left you last week, I ended up down at Keloland going head to head with the speaker. And if you watched it, I think I held my own. So it was good, but it made me rise up to that level and say, you know what, I do have confidence in what I'm saying and what I believe. So it was fun. Also, to all of you, I see a lot of common faces that came out on Saturday to our Cracker Barrel that asked excellent questions. Again, Reynold will be there next week. At the Downtown Holiday Inn. They are allowing us to sit with our district, or if we want to go and kind of spread the wealth of Democrats, then we'll go on a different date. So Reynold has opted to go sit outside of our district, but to actually be a voice for Democrats on that day. I was the lone Democrat, and again, I think the questions and answers, they went well. And you may be surprised, but I wasn't surprised to note that many of the Republican representatives from our districts here too were on the right side of some of those answers, okay? And that is, this last week has been, I say, a good week in Pierre in certain ways. And that's because some of our hateful legislation, that I want to call it, against transgendered persons or against bathroom bills, those different types of things, they all died in committee. So, I mean, that is a real success, you guys. They didn't come across to the House this year. So people are getting sick of that, okay? And I was talking to Ray, a former student of mine, about that, and we are making some progress. I do believe, and that's because we're out there working and fighting and saying, no, this is not right, and South Dakotans do not accept this intolerance. So that's positive. So also talking to former colleague and friend Bonnie over here, though, about the assault on unions. And for whatever Speaker Mickelson just, he would say, no, it's not an assault on unions, but I don't see it that way. It's last year we were able to take the union rights away from our technical school teachers, and this year it was trying to get our administrators in our buildings not to be able to collectively bargain, and we stopped that. And it was to, we also didn't want, help me here, we were able to stop the second one, but this third one made it through, and that's for university professors, employees. They have made it through the House by 2 votes. And so they are chipping away at that, and I'm nervous that what's to come on that, okay? I don't want to see what's happened in Wisconsin, you know, those different types of things move over here. You know, the argument is we're a right to work state and all of the different things that go with that. We can't strike and we can't do these things anyway. We need the right, it's a right. Bargaining is a right, we will stand up for that, and I know that Senator Nessiba and I will be on that side of these issues. As they come up into it. And so we've seen that. Success and failure, you know, how do you rate that? What do you see happening? People want to know, how's it going? I'd say in general, at least the House Democrats, we're more optimistic this year than we were last year at what, just the tone, I guess, of what we've been able to do. The one thing that is interesting to us is the assault on the initiated measures and those types of things. I know there's a list going around, but there's out there of just a whole pile of bills related to it. And I'm going to let Senator Nessiba talk more about that, because he was on a committee actually this summer that tried to deal with some of the issues left over from IM-22 repeal last year. And several of these things on this bill, I think Democrats, we would have probably supported and been fine with it until we had 30 of them. And then it kind of just became our stance, at least within the House caucus, that no, we're not going to be a part of this assault on that process, okay? So that's kind of where we've stood if you look at our votes on those, okay? So know that. Other than that, again, it's been great. It's been really good to see you folks when you are able to come up to Pierre. It helps energize us a little bit, because our meetings start at 7 in the morning or 7:30 in the morning, and we're done at about 9 o'clock at night every day. And just seeing who we're working for really does help. So again, thank you for the opportunity. One more plug for Jim back there, and I'll say, when he talked about the money that this group brings forward, I didn't have any money. I didn't have a campaign. I didn't have anything, and my wife doesn't like politics, so ask him, say, can we, you want to just do this on our own? That would have been a no. And so the very first money I did get, I had an individual contributor gave me a $50 check, and I had Democratic Forum give me money. And that money let me write a letter to ask for money. So, but that's what it took. And it was so helpful at that time at the beginning of a campaign to know that you have somebody back there supporting you and doing what you're doing. So thanks to Democratic Forum, and I'm going to let Senator Nessiba take it.
How many of you were at the Cracker Barrel last Saturday? How do you think Jamie Smith did last Saturday? I'm really proud of how he is continuing to develop and be an effective leader for us on the House side. So it's good to see. I would definitely want to leave some time to be able to talk about any bills that you're talking about. I just want to talk about 3 things quick. So the first thing is I spend most of my time locked in a room from about 7:15 in the morning until noon every day on appropriations. And I was honored to be one of 8 people that gets to put together the revenue subcommittee. And these are really great odds for us, because they have to have 1 House Democrat and 1 Senate Democrat, so it's Allers and I, and then there's only 6 Republicans, so so there's like 25%. This is a lot better than this. That's a lot better than the Senate floor or the House floor. So here's really need some more Democrats in here, but, and the numbers really look better. Our process, I just want to say a little bit about how we do this. We really have a good process to figure out how to do the forecast for the next year. So what we do is the Bureau of Finance and Management, Jim Terwilliger is the governor's economist. And what he does is he uses a model that they've been using for a long time, first developed by Ralph Brown, and it's a forward-looking model. So he actually goes out and does forecasts of what GDP is going to be, what unemployment's going to be, what farm income is going to be, looking to the future, and then plugging that into a regression equation to try and figure out what is our sales tax revenue likely to be, what are these other numbers going to be, and he has different equations for each of the revenue sources, and that's how he forecasts. On the LRC side, the Legislative Research Council, we have a guy named Jeff Melhoff, young guy, who uses a completely different approach. He uses a backward-looking model. He uses a model, something called Holt Winter, or sometimes something called an ARIMA model, where he is really tracking the historical trends in the data to try and figure out, based on the past, where is this thing headed. So two completely fundamental different ways of doing this, and then we put them both together in the same room, and we ask questions of them, and then we have this revenue subcommittee. We take those two numbers, and then I ask us to also to put together what got referred to, basically, if we picked all the high numbers, what would that number be? And if we picked all the low numbers, what would that be? And then to also figure out what the average would be. Because what we do as a committee, the 8 of us sit down and say, well, what do you think of this one? And we make a motion, basically, for each of the 16 sources. The overwhelming big one is the sales tax number, which for 2019 is forecast to be over an even $1 billion, which is an awful lot of sales tax revenue. And the numbers are pretty good. So we have about $16 million more for this fiscal year, right, that will end in June. $16 million more than what the governor thought we would have when he gave his budget address in December. So there might be some flexibility to be able to do some things there. And it was about 18.5, almost 19 million more for next fiscal year. And again, that's we're talking about a fiscal year. We're writing a budget now for a year that doesn't begin until July 1st and runs until the following June 30th, which for economists, it's difficult to try and figure out how far to look that out. But anyway, there should be a little more flexibility there. I don't know what's going to happen, but at least we're talking about the possibilities that maybe state employees won't go backwards. Right now, if we do nothing, state employees' insurance premiums are going to go up about $7 million. Plus $5 million out of the trust fund. So they would go back to about $12 million. If we can't put some money in there just to keep them whole, because they've had 2 years of no raises. So that would be one of my priorities, is that we can at least leave state employees, if we could give them a little bit to offset what they're experiencing for those with dependents, the higher insurance premiums they have. And again, we're always concerned about teachers and being able to put something back into the formula for teachers. So I'm hopeful that there will be a little bit of revenue to do some of those things that everybody in this room, I think, would like to do. And so I continue to learn a great deal on that in the appropriations process. So there's some hope for optimism there. The second thing I want to talk about is, darn Danielson always has that camera running. We're here at the VFW, so I wanted to say a couple of words just about the cemetery. So at appropriations yesterday morning, we were supposed to meet at 8 o'clock. I think every senator and every representative signed off on the bill to have a veterans cemetery in Sioux Falls. And the main opponent is the governor on this thing. And again, I don't think the governor likes veterans. The governor is trying to think about how do we pay for this thing over time. That a cemetery does come with expenses, and he just wants to think through it in hard numbers in terms of what revenues are going to come in, what's going to be our ongoing costs, because you do have to maintain a veterans cemetery at a particular standard that our veterans deserve. And so he's thinking hard about that. But so much about what causes angst here is process. So yesterday morning, 8 o'clock, Sutton and Allers and I are there, sitting around the table, waiting for the other 15 members of appropriations to show up, because as usual, they're having a meeting before the meeting. because 3 versus 15 isn't good enough for them. So, and part of their problem is the tension between the House and the Senate. My sense is that the Senate side wants this thing to pass, and my sense is the House side doesn't want it to pass. And I can't speak for all of them because I can't quite figure out who is voting which direction on that. But we finally started at about 8:20 yesterday morning and took a lot of proponent testimony. The committee room, 362, was absolutely jammed full. Every seat was taken, people standing up and back, hearing from veterans, wanting to be able to be buried close, talking about, we're one of a few states that doesn't actually have a state veterans cemetery, and that it's important we act now because there's some folks in Minnesota that would also like to have a state cemetery, and if we don't do ours, they're going to build one there, and it's going to encompass this area, and we'll never get one. So timing about this is important. So we took, 45 minutes worth of proponent testimony, and then seemingly out of nowhere, there was a hog house amendment to kill the bill entirely, rewrite it, and require $9 million endowment before we could move forward. It was as bad of a committee process as I've ever watched. I mean, the gavel had to be pounded multiple times, so we had to defer action. People were really, really angry. And so we will try this again next week, and people are working behind the scenes. There's a real argument going on about what the proposed revenues would be, what the proposed expenses would be, how much of those expenses would be right up front, right? At the beginning, it would be pretty small, right? You would think that over time, those expenses will grow as the cemetery becomes bigger, but that the expenses at the beginning are going to be far smaller than they would be. And the governor really wants to forecast those costs going out 20 years or something. So if you do care a lot about that issue, talk to your legislators about that and maybe send a note to the governor about that. But I hope that they can figure that thing out. Third thing I wanted to say is that I'm going to have a really busy 41st day. It's kind of funny. So I had a fantastic paid sick leave bill that is at the 41st day. I had a fantastic bill to prohibit asking people about their previous salary that will be at the 41st day. I had a great net neutrality bill based on what the governor of Montana had done as an executive order, basically saying you don't have to follow net neutrality rules unless you want to contract with the state. Then you have to follow net neutrality rules. And I think it would have gone some way to maintain those, but they killed that. They lobbied me hard enough on a consumer protection bill I had on ISPs that I actually withdrew it because it was going to be a pointless fight like so many of mine are. But one of the most important fights that we had is the one that Kathy Rechtelsbauer, who's now passing around flyers, we got the band back together again from 2004. So for those of you who have been hanging around this for a while, you know that Kathy and I and many of you in this room circulated petitions and worked hard to try and repeal the sales tax on food as an initiated measure back in 2004. 2004, right? Yeah. It's still a good idea. It's even a better idea now. So I need to explain this just a little bit. And then, and it's not, so we brought it up, we took great testimony, and the vote was, we got one vote. And they had sent it to the 41st day. But we're going to bring it up again. Dan Allers and I talked to Ray Ring, and Ray Ring has a bill that he usually brings every year, and Dr. Ring is going to let us hog house his bill with my bill, and try to get on the House side and try a little different tact on this on Thursday, and House taxation to see if we can get a few more votes. But here's the thing. So a couple of years ago, when they passed the half-cent teacher salary, they agreed that if we ever won a Supreme Court case and we started getting revenue, that for every $20 million we get, we would take 1/10 of 1% off the overall rate. So if you get an extra $20 million from internet sales, the rate would go from 4.5 to 4.4 at the state level. What my bill does, what our bill does, is that instead of taking the rate down, it narrows the base a little bit by taking it off of food, and you take, for every $20 million, you take 1 percentage point off of food, and this is allowed, because as you know, every state around us, no state around us taxes food at all, and states that have done the streamlining can have a separate rate for food. So some charge 0 for food, some charge a lower rate for food, almost no state charges the full amount for food as they do for everything else. So this is about timing. that either the rate is going to go down or narrow the base if we win the Supreme Court case that I feel pretty optimistic about. And so this is a great opportunity, probably the best opportunity we have ever had to do this. So I would imagine your flyer, or if you are on Kathy's email list, you may have gotten some contact information from the House about the House Taxation Committee. So if you could just fill their email boxes between now and Thursday with your support that you think 1 percentage point off of food is better than 0.1% overall on the rate, because it makes our system less regressive, right? The problem with taxing food is that poor people end up spending more of their money on food, so they spend more of their total income on that tax than do other people. The other thing, the argument that David Owen, who I've been fighting with since 2004, is that the food tax is stable. And I just had, a couple of nights ago, we were having dinner with a gentleman from Hy-Vee, and he pointed out that one of the things is that even Hy-Vee has seen is that that's not as true as it used to be, because people are buying less and less raw food. It's not as stable of a source that it used to be, because people are buying more and more prepared food. And the tax would still be on that prepared food, and in the bill that I'm proposing on Thursday would still remain on candy and on pop. And so if you have a bill that you really want to advocate for, I think that this would make a significant difference in people's lives. So I'd ask for your support on that. And Jim has a question. I'm not open for questions yet.
It has to do with is your bill, would that release sales tax on paper products, hygiene products?
So we would, all these other things would still be taxed. So it's only a cut on grocery food, unprepared grocery food. So if you go and buy milk or beef or bread or baby formula, those would be the things that would be cut on. And it would be cut at a rate of, for every 20 million, you would get 1% off that, 1 percentage point down. And that's actually a conservative estimate. When I first did the math, I thought 10 would get us there, but I went back and did it again with Red Box in the LRC, and it would really only take about 16 or 17 to do it, but I want to be safe, right? I want to make sure that we still have plenty of money for teacher pay, that overall revenue continues to grow. So it's a conservative saying, I want to make sure that we have this 20 before we cut what I think is about 16. And the other thing that's good about my bill is that it's in statute. So if we find that that number wasn't sufficient, you could change it in future years until we get that phased out. So it's manageable, it's reversible, it's timely, it's a great idea. And so that's one of the most exciting things that I'm working on. Yeah. Oh, go ahead and clap.
To try to help with the tax improvement. I was in the Senate in 2008, but one thing that I kind of ran into was the fact that the taxes go back to the Indian tribes. That was almost the biggest hurdle. And also that, with what you're talking about, if you gain a certain amount of tax base, that you can start to pull back on that. The trouble, there isn't a replacement plan in what you're talking about.
Yeah, I do have a replacement plan. So my replacement plan is that we're actually broadening the base to internet sales, because it's saying unless we have to win the court case, and when those sales go up by 20 million, then we would cut it. So the replacement revenue is coming. So and that's why it's different, because you had a great bill in 2008, but this is better, but it's only better because way back then when people were talking about streamlining, and we've been talking about streamlining since 2003 and 4, because those of you who pay attention in Sioux Falls know that the rate went up from 1% to 2%, and we were told at the time, we need to do this for streamlining, because someday we're going to be able to collect internet sales tax, and maybe someday we'll be able to take the tax off of food, but it went from 1 to 2, and in Rapid City it went from 0 to 2.
So getting back to the issue about the tribal, what can you let this audience know what that really is?
Yeah,
how you would, go over that hurdle.
And I've only had a brief conversation with Sean Bordeaux, who is my expert go-to on all things having to do with taxes and tribes. This bill leaves the 2% on municipalities would still be able to tax it. So I can't. This only deals with the 4.5% that is the state. So any municipal tax would still remain there. And do you know the answer for what happens with tribes?
Tribal tax contracts with the state are compacts with the state. end up with the tribes taxing at the same rate as the state, which is the point that Tom Merchant is bringing up, because then the tribes lose food, lose revenue if we lower the tax on food, then there's taxes at the state, right? So they would lose, and the tribes need the money. And this is recognized by the tribes. And every time we ask about this, the tribal leaders, they have said and sent it a letter in writing saying, we know we would lose some money on this, but we think it's more important for our people to be able to buy the food they need. And to me, that's leadership.
Yeah, but not all the tribal leaders have. I mean, that each individual compacts are quite different in that. But the point that you're making is that it never comes out of the person's pocket initially, the individual native person. But what happens with these compacts is all the money's collected and it goes back to the tribal leadership to, utilize it in whatever way they deem necessary. So it's two ways of looking at it. But if the money never leaves the pocket of the people, they have more work.
And that's what Sean Margot said last week, Monday, a week before when I talked to him.
But
Sean
yeah,
Margot said, I'd rather have it in my pocket to spend it.
so that's a hurdle that I, yeah.
No, thank you for bringing that one, to my attention, and I'm glad we get, one more shot at this on Thursday, and there's a lot of other things I want to say, but I really want to open it up to questions. Maybe we should just move up here, and we'll do our best, and, bring that along, because you can't remember all 600 bills, Jamie?
No.
I can't even remember the numbers of my bills.
Yeah.
Senator Nessiba, a couple of your bills do something that I've heard in several meetings people ask for. I was at a after-tracker meeting a couple of weeks ago where some potential candidates from 15, I believe it was, and other people in the room were concerned about the lack of a focused message that says this is what we are as Democrats. Some bills, a couple of years ago, the food and the minimum wage, but what seems to be lacking are bills that say these are what we are as Democrats. That the whole state that are popular, that we can get behind and can be defining. Maybe they only have Democrat sponsors and would even expect them to pass, but they would define us, and the candidates can say, if you can get more Democrats in there, we might be able to get this passed. That doesn't. It seems to be lacking, or at least there's a perception that that's lacking.
Yeah. Let me try to address that issue. Issues that I think are concretely Democratic ones that I keep hearing us bring up over and over again, and including Senator Sutton, who's talking about these, is again the need for transparency and open government. He's had a number of bills that have been killed that are trying to do that, but that's an important focus: is transparency, open government. A second one, we still have a bill alive to talk about needs-based scholarship. South Dakota gives $11, revised number, $11.86 for each Pell eligible student in the state. So $11.86. Minnesota now is up to about $1,600, and Wyoming's at $2,200 versus our 12. Okay, so you want to know why South Dakota is a leader in number of students with student loan debt, and you want to know why we're a leader in high levels of student loan debt? It's because the state doesn't do its share. Clap for that. The need-based scholarship.
I couldn't hear that. Was that share or was that another S word? I didn't hear that.
So, transparency, needs-based scholarship. Sutton continues to talk about, we're one of 2 states, so we're one of 7 states that has no pre-K system. I think we're one of 2 states that doesn't even have a board to have a conversation about having a pre-K system. And so we've been continuing to work on that in terms of education. And so we want that. We are unified as a party, both in the House and the Senate, opposed to these. They're reversals, they're taking away freedom. We passed a resolution, Universal Declaration of Human Rights will turn 70 this year. Number 23 is that a basic fundamental human right is everybody has a right to belong to a union and to have a collective bargaining organization. And what else would you add to that list? So, education, transparency, collective bargaining, and again, protecting the right to initiate a measure and the right for the people to be able to do it. I have my name on a number of those bills, so 10 of those bills that came out of the task force, I think I supported 8 of the 10, but then there's an additional 15 that are mostly bad bills. My position is, I had one more bill afterwards. I had a bill that I think has made it on the Senate and sent it over to the House side, 79, 97, one of those, that has an additional disclosure, because we couldn't figure out who was paying for the Payday Lenders campaign back in 2015 when they were out there. We wanted to know who was paying for it. They didn't have to do a disclosure until about February 1st. You don't find out until they're on the ballot. And so when I did that, I said, well, you know what, committee, I'm going to go talk to the legislators. So I went and talked to Jim Bolin and said, hey, Jim Bolin, this is what I'm thinking about doing. I'd really like you to co-sponsor my bill. I think this would have gotten support. And then I went over to the House side, and I sent it to Kent Peterson, and I sent it to Tim Reed. And I said, hey, I'd really like you guys to co-sponsor this bill. I think we had a good process this summer. And they all co-sponsored. Now I do see Jim Bolin's name, at least on one of those bills that's related to initiative measures that has nothing to do with our summer task force, and he didn't return the same favor and ask me to come over and give me my opinion, because he suspected I probably would oppose it. So, so I think I can just simply oppose all the rest of those, because we had a summer process that was thoughtful, that was collegial, that worked for consensus, and many of them are ideas that we killed over the summer. Right, that we already brought them up and went, no, this is unworkable. We can't find any group consensus on this, and we dismissed the idea. So, and I hope that you've seen the little web program that's out there that makes it really easy to you to send an automated message to, if you're on any list from Rick Weiland or from Dre. Do you happen to know, Nick, what the name of that group is? Anybody know?
It's Joan McMillan's, it ends up indivisible, common ground indivisible.
That's not it either. It's something about
Don't silence us.
don't silence us. Don't silence us. So if you go to that website, you can go out there, you can click on your legislator, and you can send them an automated note. It's probably best if you change the subject line and add something about why you personally care to make that a little more, a little better. So I am starting to see a few of those, and I'm getting 2 of all of them.
You need to. It helps you soak in. Okay. John, one more thing that I'd add to that whole list, and I think that however you approach this, but that South Dakota welcome all people. South Dakotans welcome all people. All right? And we welcome all people, and immigrants, we welcome you, gender identity, everything. You're welcome here in the state of South Dakota. And I think there's just, we will not tolerate anything other than everybody's welcome.
At last week's Cracker Barrel, I will give one kudos to Speaker Mickelson, who even said, we shouldn't let Neil Tapio decide which countries people are able to immigrate to South Dakota from. So even Speaker Mickelson gets that, and I think that Neil Tapio is wearing out his welcome in his own caucus. Yes?
When you talk about those joint resolutions, I think they are 1007 and 8 maybe, that are trying to take the ballot initiative away.
And I'll let Jamie pull those up. And
House Bill 1275.
yeah, so many. Tell me that number one more time, the first one.
1275, which would make petitions, you could only get your own Senate district.
Oh yeah, those are horrible bills, because part of it, when you start dividing it down or trying to have geographic requirements, the density outside of Sioux Falls and Rapid City becomes so difficult to be able to do that. So in a majority of the districts, it starts to become, it's just an impossible, a really difficult hurdle for anybody to overcome.
Well, and that would say that we should geographically spread our districts out across the state too, and we shouldn't have as many in Sioux Falls if you follow that logic, right? Let's give the North, let's put just as many legislators out in the far west corner of our state. We represent the people, so we're with you on that. So
Again, yeah, keep writing about that. And the other one you talked about, was this the constitutional amendment to actually ban initiated constitutional amendments, which is another terrible, horrible idea. Or there's one that would make everything go back and be approved by the legislature. Let me just say, one of the problems for Republicans is that in Pierre, they have, on the Senate floor, they have 29 of 35 seats. So they have like 85% power there, and it's even slightly worse on the House side. And what they forget is that 52% of South Dakotans are not registered Republicans. 52% of South Dakotans are not registered Republicans. 48% of the state is registered Republicans. We're about, what are we? Are we at 30? 40? Yeah, Democrats are about 30. If you look at the last February 1st number, we're continuing to lose numbers. And there's about 22% that are independent, constitutional, libertarian. But together, we're 52%. And Republicans have this idea that when they are meeting in their caucus or on their floors, they think that they speak for the people, and they are so deeply out of touch, and the structure leaves them so deeply out of touch that they're in a disadvantage. So to the degree you can remind them of that, I think that would be a useful educational process.
Do you have a sense if that Senate Bill 110 attack on Planned Parenthood is going to fly all the way through the governor?
That was a terrible, horrible bill. It is no fun to stand up and argue and talk about abortion on the Senate floor. People tell me not to do it, and so I got up and talked about it. So, the first 15 sections, I know that one because I read that one carefully. We don't typically ever name the name of a company in statute, and they do. They name Planned Parenthood. The first 15 sections of that bill are findings. We didn't have any hearings. We didn't have any findings, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to put that in there to support their case. And then section 16, what section 16 does is it amends what has to be said to women when they visit Alpha Center or one of these other things. That is currently in litigation. It's currently enjoined. It's not even enforced. We are in the process of amending a bill that's in a lawsuit that's enjoined by the court. The only thing it's going to lead to is more cost, more legal costs for the state of South Dakota, have no impact on abortion or anything that gets passed on anybody else. And so spending money on the extraordinary litigation fund on cases like this, it seems like we always have another. We just passed a bill for $400,000 to fund the extraordinary litigation fund. It's on stupid bills like this.
And to pile on with what Reynold said is, if we're willing to pay that extraordinary litigation fund, put money there, it would be money much better spent on prevention, and we'd have unintended pregnancies, and we wouldn't have to worry about abortion.
As somebody who's handled a lot of local petitions, how does the changes in the initiative and referendum process going to affect us that circulate petitions? And we try to follow the local law that we have, or ordinance we have here, but now how's that going to change this?
Well, if things make it all the way through, you may have to prove your identity. The list of things that you have to put on the list to just show that you're able to circulate a petition seems like harder than to get a driver's license for me personally. So I would hope that didn't make it through. The one, putting an email address, I think we talked about this the other day at the Capitol, and if it wasn't you, I don't remember. One of them was as simple as just putting a name and email address on the top of the person that solicited the petition. That one didn't bother me as much, even though you signed the back of the petition and they know who you are. If somebody wants to say, hey, did you really solicit that petition, and be able, that one didn't bother me as much. But there's several that give me a lot of heartburn.
And this will be my last comment, but our mutual friend, Teresa Staley, had a great letter to the editor, to her Republican friends. If you haven't read it, go find it. It says, it works just fine. Stop messing with our initiated measure process. Keep your hands off of it. And I just want to agree with Teresa when she's right, and she's right on that one. No, we're done, I think. I don't know. Tom, do we let Jim?
Wants to ask
do you want to ask Jim one more time or not?
Please. Just give me a hard time.
For you, Tom. Okay.
I'm just curious, how are your Republican colleagues dividing on their House race, federal House race, and the governor's race? Is there deep divisions within the caucuses?
I can't tell, but there are three parties in Pierre, right? There's the Democratic Party, there's sort of a moderate Republican Party, and then there's the other part of the Republican Party. And those two parties are fierce in getting at it, and everybody was, okay, last comment. It's good that the legislature only meets 4 days in a row, because by the end of the day, yesterday, we were all a little edgy, and we all need a few days away from each other before we go back to work, I think. So, and it's just because of all of those tensions. So it's good to have a 4-day weekend, and I'm glad I could come back and work for 2 of those days. And I think we're going to have to stop, but I'm happy to. I've got a little time. I'm happy to stay around and talk to anybody who's interested.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Tom.
Folks, anybody else want to entertain us?
We don't come up here to entertain you. We come up here to inform you.
What kind of morons run this outfit?